Hello, today I present to you an extremely attractive application for music lovers. It's completely free. You can listen to music online or download unlimited music to use whenever you don't have internet. The powerful search function helps you find anything you want. Trust me. It's hard not to find what you're looking for because the search function is really powerful. Application download link is attached in the description of the video. I'm pretty sure you'll like it. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Elise Preston. Thank you for joining us. Afghanistan is on the brink of collapse as the Taliban continues to make rapid advances across the country. The militant group has captured more than a dozen provincial capitals in recent days, including the second largest Afghan city, Kandahar. The Taliban now controls more than 50% of the nation and is closing in on the capital city of Kabul. This comes just weeks before the U.S. plans to fully withdraw from Afghanistan. Meanwhile, 3,000 U.S. troops are being deployed to help evacuate staff from the U.S. Embassy. CBS News foreign correspondent Roxana Saberi has more from Kabul.
More than two-thirds of the country is now in the hands of the Taliban. Today, they seized the capital of Helmand province, where U.S. troops once fought some of their bloodiest battles.
We are certainly concerned by the speed with which the Taliban has been moving.
Now they're eyeing what would be their biggest prize of all.
For now, daily life here in the capital, Kabul, appears to be carrying on more or less as usual. But many people here fear this way of life could soon come to an end.
Banafsha Rahimi says her family plans to remain here, but as a woman who studied on an American scholarship, she needs to flee.
You're afraid of being killed if the Taliban come here?
Yeah, I'm afraid of being killed. I'm totally sure that I will not survive here.
She has reason to fear. This video posted on social media appears to show a Taliban fighter counting 14 bodies, all with their hands bound behind their backs. At least one is a boy, executed for fighting back. As the Taliban have gained ground, they've also gained strength, picking up the spoils of war left behind by retreating Afghan forces. And more fighters after releasing Taliban prisoners, like in the city of Logar, only around 50 miles from Kabul.
Afghanistan's government is clearly feeling the pressure. Tonight, the Defense Ministry called on all Afghans ages 18 to 50 to join the army to protect the country, especially the capital. Elise?
Roxana Saberi, thank you. For more on this, I'm joined now by Michael Hanlon and Jason Beardsley. Michael is a senior fellow and director of research for the Brookings Institution's foreign policy program. And Jason is the national executive director for the Association of the U.S. Navy and a national security expert. Thank you both so much for joining us. Michael, I want to start with you. The fall of Kandahar is really noteworthy because it has significance to the Taliban. Can you explain?
Sure. It is, in many ways, the home and the original base of the Taliban movement. And also, it goes back in ancient Afghan history as a very important Islamic site and a spiritual site. And of course, the Taliban claim to be students of Islam. That's where their name comes from. That's what it means. And that's where Osama bin Laden was holed up in the late 1990s as he began to plan the 9/11 attacks. So to the extent any Taliban take pride in that, and some do, then there's additional significance from that fact as well. So you're right, it is a very important city symbolically. It was not going to be the easiest one for the government to hold, partly because it's in the heartland where the Pashtun-based Taliban are strongest, but nonetheless, it really is a big boost to their momentum.
Jason, how has the Taliban been able to seize these cities so quickly? And at this rate, do you see the Afghan government completely collapsing?
First of all, I think to the question of speed and how they've been able to do it, that has a lot to do with the type of terrain and the actual level of Afghan government forces that are occupying the different provinces. A lot of folks in these outlying regions are very sparsely equipped and they're not heavily manned. So sometimes a province falls mostly because it's kind of way out of the way, very difficult terrain, and mustering enough fighters with, say, 50 fighters to roll into a town sometimes means they get nominal control over a province. So the speed is, one, about the terrain. It's also about the level of the Afghan forces and government. And it does look like they're going to have a difficult time holding the government in place against this onslaught. But I will tell you that American soldiers and folks that have served on the ground in Afghanistan, we've always known that. Folks that have come back, my peers from back-to-back deployments, have been saying that for quite some time. So this is not quite the surprise that it looks like.
Now, Michael, this takeover is happening just weeks before the U.S. is set to completely withdraw troops from Afghanistan. President Biden says he does not regret this move, given what is going on. Do you think it was a mistake?
Well, I absolutely think it was a mistake, and it's a tragic mistake at this point. You know, there are two levels to the mistake. One was the decision to leave as if somehow we've been waging the same war for 20 years and it was just time to throw up our arms in frustration and acknowledge defeat. We were down to only 3,000 U.S. troops at the time Mr. Biden made this decision, far less than at any time in the last 10 to 15 years. So our role was very much in support. And therefore, it was not just the same thing for 20 years in a row. The additional mistake was the rapidity, the fast exit. And some people may say, well, how can you call any departure after 20 years fast? Mr. Biden announced this decision in April, and already we're basically gone. And by June, we were basically just focused on our own departure. So there was no real transition strategy. The Afghans were already providing most of the fighting forces on the ground, which is why U.S. casualties in Afghanistan had been so low for about a half dozen years. But air power, intelligence, planning, coordination, those sorts of things, you need a bit of time to develop a transition strategy. So I think President Biden was also mistaken, once he decided to leave, to decide that we had to leave by this summer. So yes, I think it was quite regrettable.
Jason, the United States has spent years and billions of dollars to develop and train the Afghan security forces, but the Army has a history of corruption. What impact has that had on its ability to fight back against the Taliban?
Yeah, it's had a huge impact. And again, peers of mine that have served in Afghanistan and some of us in Iraq and other locations are very wary of some of the rhetoric that happens out of Washington, D.C. because, you know, the perspective is that we should be able to train them and pass on our training. But we have seen from the beginning of this effort into the late stages that Afghan National Army soldiers are often very suspicious. We've had soldiers, U.S. service members shot in the back by some of our allies. The corruption that you describe is rife within the ranks. And so we've always had this sort of knowing perception that as soon as America leaves, the threads of this thing are very gently held together and it's going to rip apart. That has not been a secret. So while this is a noble effort, or it has been, those of us who have paid the price on the ground or buried friends, we've said for a long time that if you have a clear strategy, a clear military objective, we've got the best service members in the world, in a history of military forces. We can achieve those objectives, but they must be military and they must be laid out clearly. We have not seen that for the last 20 years, maybe the last 18.
Michael, what are some of the larger implications this could have for Afghanistan and its people?
Well, the implications for Afghanistan and its people are horrible. This will be either a complete Taliban takeover rather soon, or it will be an ongoing civil war where the government manages to hold on to a few big cities and pockets of territory, and the two sides duke it out. And meanwhile, the country sinks back into the kind of poverty that characterized it in the 1990s. So I think there is no good news here for the Afghan people. I will acknowledge, first of all, Jason's points about the difficulty of working in this theater are certainly right on. And the corruption that you spoke about with him has been a huge impediment to progress. And it's also helped motivate the Taliban and given them recruits. But I will also acknowledge, I think we can probably limit the damage to American security. It's going to take more work doing it from around the region. Overflights of long-range aircraft, intelligence assets, trying to keep an eye on potential terrorist enclaves. It's going to be harder to do now from a more remote location. And I think we'll have to spend more time and effort, more resources, and probably more of President Biden's time on the effort than if we had simply stayed put. But I think we probably can prevent another 9/11. So I don't want to go so far as to predict that we will suffer catastrophic terrorism from this region. We're going to work very hard to make sure that's not the case, but there's no good news for the Afghan people here.
Jason, what do you think this means for the diplomatic relationship between the U.S. and Afghanistan?
It's going to be strained. This is a difficult period. Our other guest, Michael, is 100% right. There were ways to kind of do this, limit the damage, and reduce the risk. What we've said from the military tactical side, though, is we have to be creative and make clear objectives. We've never done that. That now leaves this burden on the diplomatic side. And we already know what the Taliban has said, and they've indicated they're not interested in Western-style diplomacy. So what we're going to likely see is a lot more friction, look for a proxy state like China to come in and begin to develop their own agendas, and they'll spread a lot of money. So what we're going to see as the United States is we're going to be in a very conflicted position shortly. It's going to take a lot of work with our allies, Turkey, Syria, Saudi Arabia, others in the region to actually settle this, and that's not easy work, as you know. So diplomatically, our other guest is absolutely right. It's going to cost more money, it's going to cost more time, and we're going to be sending a lot of assets in the region to try to quell what violence may erupt over the next 3 years.
Michael O'Hanlon and Jason Beardsley, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.